Morning, everyone. This is Griffin Brewer with Motility Software's Professional Services Department. Taking a late start here. We're juggling a Zoom session login, but we're ready to get started here in just a couple minutes here. I think I saw a couple other people joining into the waiting room, so I will give maybe about 2 minutes here so we can have enough time to get through service invoicing this morning. So yeah, thank you all for joining. I'd say about 2 minutes. We'll go ahead and get started. All right, everybody. Thank you for holding. And appreciate your patience for getting started this morning. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know throughout the session. There is a Q&A panel within the Zoom meeting controls that you can pose a question. I'll try to answer as I go through, if it makes kind of sense with the flow of everything. And if not, I'll always try to get to any remaining questions at the end. That way we can have a little bit of a Q&A session. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said earlier, today is going to be service invoicing. Now, there's a lot of kind of meat and potatoes in this service module. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of things, different procedures, ways that can be done. Primarily today, we're just going to focus on navigation, how to kind of work between different aspects of the service department, whether it's your prep for delivery items, or internal work, or how you kind of do a shop ticket, things like that. So just general navigation that'll hopefully give you a better idea to get familiar with it. So let's go ahead and get started. Parts and service, for those of you that have joined our other sessions, I've mentioned in the past that for the CRM and for the unit inventory modules, it doesn't really matter which location you are. So, for example, if you are a multi-location dealer, your CRM is shared. So customers that I logged in or booked into the system in location 1, you'll be able to see them across the board and invoice them or sell to them at one of the other locations. Same goes for unit inventory. Units I key in location 1, with the correct permissions access, I'll be able to search those up in location 2 or 3, right, for purposes of transferring the unit from location to location. That all makes sense. Parts and service, however, is a department where we don't really transfer work orders, right? If a customer brings a unit over and you get work started there, usually it's going to get completed at that store. Generally, you transfer mid-ticket to one of your other locations. So if I open up this parts and service here in company A or location 1, I'm only going to see invoicing for that store. There is some shared information like parts. I can check quantities across my company to make sure that if I do have one in stock at location 3, I can transfer it to ourselves. But for the most part, when you click on a parts and service module, you are only seeing the items relevant to that location. So just figured I'd make that distinction here because you'll find that while the CRM and unit inventory, even deal desking allows you kind of multi-location access, parts and service is very specific to the location that you work at. So if you are a multi-location dealer and you're perhaps a regional parts and service employee who works between stores, you'll want to make sure you open up the correct one for that day. That way you don't accidentally create a work order at the wrong location. To confirm which location that you're in, anytime you open up a motility program, up at the top you're always going to see a number ID. So I can say parts and service, I'm in company 1, versus if I were to open up parts and service in location 2, you will see, and you can have both open at the same time, right? Maybe I am working out of those stores today, just kind of regionally auditing, making sure all our open tickets are closed. Well, location 1 we see here, and then location 2 I can find with that information right there. I did get a message saying that the audio is fading in and out. I'm going to go ahead and move my phone over and set it up on my Wi-Fi calling. Let me know if that's any better, Denny. Thank you for the heads up there. Sometimes being in Florida here with the rainy season, well, let's be honest, it's always raining here. Sometimes the cell reception I get isn't too great. So let me know if there's still any issue with the audio as we go through, and I'll try to see if I can fix it. Thank you. Okay, good to hear. All right, so like I was mentioning, if it was cutting in and out, really the main thing I'm trying to show at the beginning here is just to pay attention to the little company number. If you're shopping invoices and someone's and they're not seeing them, make sure it's at the right store, because again, it can be very easy to not notice you're in company 1 versus company 2. But it's just where when you're working out of modules, you can between them, just jump out and look at, take a look at what that company number says. So I'll go ahead and close company 2. We're just going to do invoicing for store 1 right now. So first thing you see when we come in is the service invoicing list. This is completely identical to the parts invoicing list. So once you can learn one half of the module on the service side, parts is to make a lot of sense to you as well. We know the departments are to be shared. We want to knock down any wall between parts and service, because those two departments really need to communicate well for the rest of the dealership to benefit. So again, part invoicing list will look very similar to service. So as you learn this, it's going to be cross-trained with the parts module. So when I click on number 400 invoicing, look at every service ticket at this company's location, so company 1, we have a tab down here at the bottom, or a little button. Now these buttons will dictate what you're seeing on the screen. So for example, if I click on quote, it looks a lot different, right? Colors have changed. What am I seeing now? Based on the invoice status is dependent upon whether it's a quote or not. So you can see I've actually got multiple quote statuses. I've got appointment, customer waiting, estimate, part in, and pending. Maybe some of these should be quote. Maybe they should be open tickets. So that really depends upon how you set your status up. So if it is a parts and service team, the team does share statuses, you want to make sure that everyone's needs are met. So looking at this quote listing, if we go into the modify statuses part and service status listing, you're going to see where all these are coming from. Now, this is pre-defaulted with a bunch of statuses, so you don't have to create any, to begin with. However, we do recommending in here kind of changing it up a bit. So, for example, my demo environment is completely jacked up. I mean, look how many statuses I have here. I don't find it advantageous at all to have 15, 20 statuses to work between, unless they truly have meaning that it's really, identifying something that's going on. It's just a lot of work. Knowing what all these mean, let's make sure we have them in the right order. What is our process flow? So instead, I would highly recommend, this list you're seeing here isn't what your system will come with. This is kind of a demo one that people have added to as time has gone on. You'll find that yours that comes with the system is probably shorter, maybe 9 statuses or so. But feel free to completely relabel these, change the colors, but kind of match what a dealership process is as as a customer arrives through to cashing out, right? So maybe we do create an appointment first. Then when they arrive, we diagnose what's going on with the camper. Then we turn it into an open ticket and move forward. But it is important, as you can see, that the status both by color and by name are really going to be indicative of what's going on within that ticket. So I want to be able to know, just by glancing, what's going on with this Sandy Roskin ticket. Well, she had an appointment. He was supposed to be here back in, months ago. So to me, I have to assume he didn't show up, right? If it's not an appointment and didn't get converted to an open ticket, so all of these old appointments really could be cleaned up, right? There's no sense in having appointments in here from 2019, 2018. I get that customer's coming back. And there are routines to keep these things clean. For example, if I go into Edit Modify, there's a tool called Void Appointments and Estimates that'll say, okay, everything prior to 10/01/2020, I want to void it if it's both a service and a parts estimate or appointment. And now after running that tool, you should see, look how many appointments my screen just erased. Now, this is something I highly advise, not just that tool that I just showed you, but the actual process, right? Keeping this screen clean is going to make it much easier for your team to utilize. If you see, like we just saw, like, let me go to the parts one should be pretty clean too. Yeah. So with both of those screens clean, how much easier is it to use this as almost like a pseudo report to know what appointments are coming in today? Even this one's a bit outdated, and we can likely void it or convert it to an open ticket if that customer arrives. So again, housekeeping within this system is going to make it easier to use. If I have 600 appointments in here that are all old information that's not doing me any good, well, that's just an entire screen's worth of wasted space that no one's able to use. Versus if I put every appointment that we have scheduled over the next 3 weeks on this list, I have a definitive list of who, the date we promised them, or the date that their appointment's set. I don't even have to use our advisor calendar, which we will talk about in a scheduling session later on. But it's just, this list view can be pretty curated to exactly what's going on. Open gets a little bit more complicated because you've got things like, outstanding warranty that we're waiting on, parts that we're waiting on. But again, depending upon the size of your dealership, should there be this many open tickets? Or how, you look at the dates on some of these. Why do I have open invoices from 2019? Again, keeping the system clean is to your advantage because now you're not pulling reports to review this information. You have it right in front of you. If I'm not wanting to know all the prep for delivery invoices that are scheduled to go out over the next period, next couple of days, I could go into status, filter for prep for delivery, and this promise date should be the delivery date coming off of the deal. So already I have bad info in here, right? Why do I have prep for delivery tickets that are almost a year old? Even going through up until here, October 30th. If these items were supposed to get delivered, the ticket never got closed out. So how do I validate that the sales was able to deliver the unit, if we didn't actually finalize our prep? This one looks like it was marked completed, all 3 job lines based on this completions column, but why did nobody cash it out? Right? So there's, obviously this is a demo database that I'm kind of ripping apart, but that's the point for you to see that, a system's hard to manage when you have lots of bad data that doesn't really agree to what's happening day to day. And the further back this goes, just the harder it is both to clean up and to use, right? We want to make sure these screens are familiar, easy to use, and it does require a little housekeeping. So I would sit down with the parts and service team ahead of time, and you already may have these parameters set in place, but to decide, what is an acceptable open invoice? If it aged beyond 60 days, do we start kind of triggering the warning call or a warning, siren to say, why do I have a 60-day-old open ticket? Are we ever going to collect this customer payment? Or warranty, set a day of warranty, how long a warranty ticket should stay open before it's, accepted that the claim is probably not going to get. These rules for yourself outside of the system will help your team kind of audit and keep the invoice listings clean, because I'm telling you, it's much better to use this screen than rely on a report to know where you're at, because this is both interactable, it's real time, everything, you have a lot of visibility in the screen. And I can do a lot of things from here, like reviewing the actual job lines themselves, checking for any parts, making sure that everything's on order, that says it's on order. There's a lot of visibility you gain by getting very familiar with this screen. And the worst thing I see is folks not using this because it is not cleaned up or attended to. So let's talk about a couple other ways of how we can keep this clean or make it easy to use. We've talked about how invoices get coded to certain windows. It's basically the status, right? So appointments and estimates land on the quote screen. Open can have anything between open invoice, prep for delivery tickets, special order received, waiting for parts, parts on order. Again, you all can completely recreate, relabel, recolor all of these statuses. So find something that fits for the dealership processes that you have. As tickets close and cash out, now we track everything that's been cashed out and finalized, and there's always a record here. We've also got voided tickets, which are, again, controlled by status. So if you ever, there's no deleting anything in this system, which a lot of people don't like, but it's less, you're less able to hide mistakes. But that's the purposes of the system. You always want to kind of work your way back to what happened to kind of get the full picture. So even canceling of an invoice, we don't delete them, we just void them, and that record lands here for whatever purpose. Maybe it's valid to find, okay, Mamira came back and she was curious what, she couldn't pay for it back last year, but she wants to get that same service done this year. Well, we can reference what was done, even though the ticket's voided, to recreate that ticket. So there's just lots of little things that I think managing these screens will put a lot of time back in your day instead of relying on reports to do so. We'll talk about a few of these other buttons in more of the specialized sessions like warranty, the flag time mode for your technicians, but just good to know that usually an invoice will land on one of the bottom windows that you're seeing here because of the status that it's in. And ultimately, you want every ticket to land in the closed cashed out, right? We've collected payment, the ticket's done, it's in accounting, we're good. So how else do we make this screen more easy to navigate? A couple of the things that I will always recommend is the headers here. So for example, if I go into my open listing, there's lots of different things you can do. Let's say I'm looking for specific pieces of information. Well, if they're not in my stock listing here, you can add to this list by going to Tools, Service Tools, Set up Invoice Columns, and then one of the three items that you see here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick Invoice Columns. And looking at here, maybe the age of the ticket, right? What did we talk about? We said anything aged over a certain date maybe needs to be reviewed. So now I've added age in here, and we can sort by that. You can actually sort by, a lot of folks don't realize this, by multiple columns. If you hold your Shift key, I can say I want to sort by age and by status. So now I have, actually, let me do this in the reverse order. Let me sort by status first, then by age. So now I have my listing view sorted by open invoices from newest to oldest, then prep for delivery from newest to oldest. And you can see that that can really help kind of line things up the way you'd expect. You can also set filters in here, either for specific amounts, or I could customize it and say, show me any age greater than or equal to 30, right? I want to quickly audit and clear out all my old tickets. So now I can put an age of 30 in here with that filter. And now I can review, okay, these are big ticket items that we really need to worry about because they're aged past a certain date. And that filter you could leave in there, so every time you log in, it's always filtering for that. But you want to be careful that you're not losing some of the information for that. So just keep in mind that those filters can be very handy. Let's say I'm looking for a specific mechanic, right? I want to see all the work I build out to mechanic number 24. Go to mechanic column, type in 24. Here's everything that he currently has assigned to him that is an open invoice. Oops, didn't mean to hit the log out key. So filtering is going to be your best friend here in navigating quickly to information that you need, especially like date, time. Let's say I'm a prep for delivery manager and I want to see everything delivering today. All right, we'll put in today's date, 11/10/2020. Hey, nothing's delivering today, so I know that I can, focus my efforts elsewhere. So sometimes those little bit of filterings can go a long way. So again, with the headers, look at all the fields you have available to you. There's quite a bit here. Now this change, whenever I add or remove to this screen, it's per user. So I could completely jack my screen up with 50 different fields and, make it completely hard to see, but you're not impacting anybody else's screens. So it's always, you're editing your own. So feel free to completely add or remove what you want. But I would recommend as a team sitting down and deciding, okay, these are the fields that we absolutely want everyone to see, right? Maybe you don't like using stock number to find units and you'd prefer to use VIN. So it would be relevant for you to have every service writer or, service advisor, service writer, service manager, all making sure VIN is on their screen, because now you could say, hey, could you pull up the ticket? The last four are, 9GF8. And you could just use those last four of the VIN and navigate directly to that ticket. If I don't have VIN and my service writer yells over to me to look it up by VIN, well, it's going to be harder for me to find that ticket. I'd have to go to search invoices and then search the VIN by here. So you always have a full document search, but I'm telling you, whether, these filters are all over our system in accounting, in parts and service, in the CRM. The more familiar you are using these, I think the faster you're going to get better in other parts of the system too, because these filters kind of afford you quite a bit, of access. So again, just make sure that if you sit down as a team and decide that VIN is valuable for everybody to see, then we'll have each user go through and set up their screen to match that. And then however you want to organize it, you can click and drag. Be careful, you can do this on top stacking thing, which I am not much of a fan of. Some folks like to add a little bit of spacing between their invoice lines, whatever you'd like to do. But just know that when you're finished and you've got the screen the way you want it, you want to make sure you hit Save Layout. If you do not and you log out of the system and come back, it's going to be back to the default and you're going to have to do it all over again. So again, sitting down with the team, defining what fields you absolutely want everybody to see. Let's say you all don't assign tag numbers to your units, then remove it, right? There's no sense in seeing that there. So getting this list curated and cleaned up the way you want it is going to make your team happier in using it, and it's going to make it easier to use. So I would just, be careful with, putting information there. All right, from here, let's move into creating a new ticket, and we'll kind of start what that process looks like. So what I've clicked on here is New Repair Estimate. There are two service document creation types. There's New Repair Estimate and New Repair Order. The differences between these two are very minimal, and I'm going to show them to you right now. So I'm going to put this open invoice over here, and I'm going to put this New Repair Estimate over here. There is only one difference between these two documents. It's the status that it starts in. If I take this New Repair Estimate and I change the open or it from appointment to open, and I take my New Repair order and change it to appointment, I have functionally just reversed the two ticket items. They're the exact same. So all I'm trying to show here is, depending upon which of these two you click, it's just a status difference between the two. So you may ask, what's the point of putting it in as an appointment versus just creating an open work order? Well, I would say it depends on the customer. If the customer is there with their camper or their truck or trailer ready to be serviced, you don't really have to set an appointment up. You could go ahead and start working on the ticket items on a new repair order. Or if you're still estimating out, whether the customer is going to agree to that work, I would create a new repair estimate instead of an order, just because you're not 100% certain if that work is actually going to proceed. So, some shops get away from using appointments or estimates because it's just one extra step to change the status. But I still find a lot of value in separating the two, because now you can show, here's what we have scheduled coming into the shop that's not here yet. And then once it does arrive, that's typically when you take it from an appointment and move it to an open ticket once the work does begin. So it's up to you all how you want to run, the shop in terms of using the system, but, using both of these is advantageous because again, now my quote screen is just purely what's incoming. So I know how busy we are over the next couple of weeks based on our promise date of when that appointment's going to arrive versus here's all the items that it should be in the shop, right? If it's in the open listing, we either have the unit that's here or maybe the customer took back their unit and we're just waiting on the parts to arrive to finalize the ticket. But typically, that work has been started once it's in this open listing. So again, between these two ticket items, the biggest difference is the status that it starts in. You're always free to kind of manipulate that. So, but I think it is good procedure to always start every service invoice as an appointment or an estimate, even if the customer is already at the shop, just so that you can turn around and print that estimate out, have them sign off on it before they continue and actually complete or start doing the work. So you saw we went ahead and hit new repair estimate. I'm going to go ahead and do that now, just so we can be a bit familiar with the ticket itself. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this so it's easier to see. So again, there's a lot in service here. Today we're just kind of talking about some general items, just getting the ticket started. How do we code it appropriately? So let's walk through this now. Again, there's going to be a lot of items that you may not attend to. You may not do sublet work. You may not schedule. Ignore it. There's some items that just you won't use here. Unfortunately, I can't hide items off the screen if you do not use them. So that's just something to keep in mind. But again, we'll kind of talk about what you use, what you won't use, and we'll go from there. We're not going to do any scheduling today, but know that a lot of times when we do this estimate or appointment process, there's a little calendar icon right here that throws this entire RO onto a calendar for you based on the date time in that you've set. So it's very easy to schedule any incoming appointments. But I will still say, if we go back to the service invoicing view, if you keep this quote screen clean, 10 appointments in this quote screen should equal the 10 appointments I would show on my calendar. So, that's just something where if we keep this list clean and use it, it may even be as good to you as a calendar would be because your dates are there, who's coming in and when. For scheduling purposes, a calendar is still going to give you a better idea as to who's available. But again, I just reiterate, keeping these invoice lists clean are to your advantage. So let's say I have a customer named Mr. Greer here on the phone. I'm going to use my own entity record. You put a last name in here to do a search. This is where we want to talk about, if you do have duplicates in your system or you have some bad data coming from a previous system, we can consolidate entity records. There's no need to have 10 different records and have to guess which one's the right one based on a cell phone or the email. So, as you get access to the system, you'll find, you can consolidate these and merge them into one. That way it's not such a crazy list view. In the meantime, if you do have data like this, you could always come in here and say, all right, are you, what's your current address? Customer gives you 1423, and I can see, oh, that's the right entity record. So again, your filters here are helping you because of, the placement, and you'll know exactly where they, that it's just easier than having to do an invoice search, at least in my eyes. So from here, we'll go ahead and click on that ticket. This is warning me that this customer does have an open RO, which in a live environment, you would probably prefer to say, okay, I'm not going to create a whole second ticket. We're just going to hit okay here and, go into the existing work order. But because this is a test system and I'm kind of showing this as a demo, I'm going to click, we're going to go ahead and do a new ticket. So, but the system's always going to try to point out to you to say, hey, by the way, there's already a ticket open for this customer. And as you can see, the system is very color coded. So the colors are always trying to tell you something. For example, why is my entity here in red? Well, someone overrode our credit limit balance of $0 and put $5,500 on account for Mr. Greer. So he is overdue. We probably need to collect that before we bill out any more on account payments to him. So that's just what that color is indicating. So again, just be on the lookout for any visual color reminders because it's probably trying to at least make you aware of something within the system. So I've got my appointment here. I've got Mr. Greer on the phone. He wants to drop off this today at 2 p.m. Now, I'm not going to use my calendar. That will be on a session. That'll actually be the next webinar that we're going to cover today at 11:30 a.m. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in here. So he's dropping off today. He's dropping off at 2 p.m. What's nice is if you fill out your date time in here, when you click on this calendar, it'll automatically place it based on your date time in. So already perfect for you. Now, I do want to talk about these dates because they get neglected. And I think this is probably one of the most powerful tools a service writer has to make sure they follow up. This is a huge thing that I've noticed as I travel, and I've gone to many different dealerships and shops. There's a lot of communication issues between service and its customers, service and the other departments relating to the customers' experiences, whether it's issues with sales, issues with their parts orders, you name it. So I'm all about trying to create additional points of contact with customers as much as possible. So here's what I've always advised doing, and this is something that I think is a good procedure to be in. I have a date time in. I have a date time out. Date time out is probably, when the ticket actually gets cashed out and closed, so you don't have to attend to that. But look at the other two dates here. You have a date time promised and a notified date time. Now, earlier, you may have heard me mention that the date time promised matches the delivery date coming off of the deal, and it does. When you drop a prep for delivery ticket and the customer is scheduled to deliver on Saturday this week, then when my PDI ticket drops, it's automatically going to have Saturday the 14th as the date time promised, right? It makes sense. If the customer has to take delivery then, that is absolutely when that work needs to be finished. But for a non-prep ticket, you may want to tell yourselves, what is our average promise date time? Can I make that assessment? Or do we just bulk it in and say, okay, typically in the non-busy season, if you drop off today, we should have your vehicle back to you within 48 hours or maybe less. So you can default and say, okay, this ticket, he's going to drop off at 2. Well, barring any weird circumstances, he should be able to pick up 2 days later. Okay? Now, that's all fine, but how do we validate to this customer that it's ready for pickup? Because if we print out this appointment, the date time promised could show that we're planning on it, being available to them 2 days later. Well, what if there's delays? What if there's issues? I don't even have my ticket information in here. So let's first put in what Mr. Greer, gave us over the phone. Then we'll try to reschedule on the top here. So he mentioned that he wants a winterization done. If I had Spader codes or any repair codes assigned, that could automatically apply my billable and, labor time. So I can say, okay, we have a winterized Spader code. Perfect. That's going to assign 1.2 billable hours. It's going to pay the tech 1.2 hours. It automatically populated my cause and correction. So again, a list of Spader codes or repair codes that are very advantageous to automatically kind of bill out everything you'd expect. And then maybe he has a bit of a roof leak that we need to diagnose. So maybe I have a diag code here that we could use. I don't see one, but again, this is a demo system, so there's not a ton of codes in here. But if I had a diagnosis code or a QC code for us to review this before, we're able to go to our customer and say what's going on, we would want something like that in here. I don't have one, so again, you don't need to use repair codes. You could just leave this complaint and cause and correction open for the technicians to fill out. But then if I know our typically, for diagnosing a roof leak, probably going to bill out an hour, pay an hour, you can check off the repair code pricing and utilize it, even though we don't have a repair code assigned. I would still try to, code our jobs as much as possible because remember, you can pull reports on this information. So for the year, I wanted to say, show me all of our winterization jobs and which techs did them and who was the most efficient. If I'm not plugging a repair code in, it's very difficult to run reports directly off of just a complaint. It's much easier for me to say, show me all the repair code jobs coded as winterized, and then I can look at by tech who was the most efficient, who was the least efficient, and make sure that we're putting the appropriate technicians on those jobs. So even if you don't use Spader codes, you can create repair codes on the fly. So just keep that in mind. So I've got 2 line items on here. I know that my time, based on what I plugged in between the winterization and roof leak,
2 days is good. I should be able to get Mr. Greer's vehicle completed and back in his hands by then. So how do we get that information back to Mr. Greer? Because once he's dropped off, it's likely that for those 2 days or the 48 hours that his vehicle is being repaired, he has no idea whether that timeline is going to be met. So here's something I've always tried to stress the usage of, because I have found value. I found shops who don't do this process and then began doing so. They come back to me a few months later saying that our customer satisfaction in the service department has gone up, right? Our just overall, our NPR score, there's less UPC cases, less heat cases. People are getting their information, because a lot of times I've found that many service complaints just come from miscommunication or lack of communication entirely. So how do we use this to our advantage in the system? Well, my recommendation is if I set a promise date, set a notified date time the day before, maybe 24 hours before, right? So what is a notified date time? Well, let's go back to our service invoicing list. Well, I've told Mr. Greer that we're promising this vehicle should be ready by the 12th. Okay. How do I get that in back to him if that isn't going to be ready by the 12th? Maybe there's delays, there's other damage that we found. We need to call and notate that and make sure that makes it back to Mr. Greer, so he doesn't just show up on the 12th and expect to take delivery. How much worse is the customer experience if they, based on previous information, show up and then find, oh, no one reached out to me letting me know my parts weren't here and I can't pick up till Friday. Now I just wasted 30 minutes driving over here. So like we talked about before, add into your service tools list a notified date, time, date. All right, so where's my notified date time? Scroll down, notified date, there we go. I'm also going to add that to my tools, service tools. Not just my, okay, I already added it to invoice columns. Okay, good. So there's my notified date time. Why don't I put next to that promise date? Okay, so let's go back to our quotes. Well, Mr. Greer did drop off his unit, like we talked about. So we're going to go in here and we're going to flip it to an open ticket, right? He's dropped it off. It's an open invoice now. We're going to start billing out work, assigning my technicians, doing whatever we need to do. But now, as I change it to an open ticket, you'll see it dropped out of my service list. And where did it go? Right into my open tickets right here at the top. And I did not click Save Layout. And as you see, my notified date time is gone. Make sure you click Notify Date. Make sure you click Save Layout. Right? Add my field, save. Now it won't drop away. Actually, let's move it to where it needs to go, then hit Save. So here's what I've been trying to show is let's see. So from here, with a notified date time next to my promise date, obviously I only have one invoice kind of set this way, but look what that does for us. If I were to come in on the 11th, I could make it one of my procedures to fill out my notified date time for today's date. And what I'm doing there is now I have a definitive list of everyone that I've said, based on our promise date, I should reach out to them and update them as to their invoice. So let's pretend today is the 11th. I come in first thing in the morning. I've done my, normal kind of housekeeping thing. I get into the system. I put in my notified date time. Maybe also I'm only advisor 001, so maybe so I don't see everybody's tickets. I just put in my advisor number, right? So now, kind of working our way back, look how much smaller the invoice list is when I put my advisor ticket number in versus the whole thing, right? So first off, put in your advisor number. Then I want to see who I need to notify today. Now I have one invoice that I need to reach out to Mr. Greer about. And based on what I'm showing here, if I don't get enough feedback, I see no jobs have been started on this ticket. I have no technician assigned. There's quite a bit of things to be done here. So what I would probably want to do is give him a call and say that, Mr. Greer, unfortunately, due to some delays internally, we won't have this vehicle ready for you by Friday. But now with that little point of contact with our customer, I can say, Mr. Greer says, all right, that's fine. He's a little begrudgingly, but it is what it is. So perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and back into my service ticket and add a note. Every point of customer contact should be logged into a note into our system. Why? Because this shows up on their entity record for visibility purposes, and it's always in here, whether this becomes a legal case or our owner wants to get involved and figure out why Mr. Greer had such a bad experience. If you log every phone call you make with these customers and put them in through their notes, you're putting that visibility in, and it's helpful for the rest of the shop, the rest of the team to see it. So I'll say, called Mr. Greer on the 11th to discuss delay. Vehicle will be ready on Friday. He was frustrated, glad we called. How much better is that, giving him that notification versus the customer arriving and being told once they're at the shop there's already an issue. So I put that note in. I could set callback dates for myself. This callback date, for those of you that were in our CRM session, is setting on the CRM side. It's not as relevant for the service team, but there's no reason the service team can't use the CRM as well, as another point of contact system. So, but for now, you could just continue using the date time promise. So now what do we discuss? Griffin's going to pick up on Friday, advance that forward, advance the notify date time forward, and now I can continue that process on Thursday. That little thing, using those two dates, has been pretty revolutionary for a couple shops that I've shown it to, because they were telling me between delays, issues, parts, being ordered and incorrect, they don't find out, or the customer won't find out until they either show up or well after the fact. The ticket's 3 weeks old, customer calls in and says, you were supposed to call me and let me know when my vehicle was ready. Well, sorry, there was a parts delay. We didn't know. We apologize for getting that information or not getting that information back to you. Well, those two little dates, as you can see, pretty easy to manipulate, pretty easy to log. I think that process makes a lot of sense in making sure that what we've told our customers, even as it changes, makes it back to them. It just seems like most of the heat cases I've found, if it's not just issues with, what was promised or damages that were found, it's just a communications error. And if we use these two little dates here, we can go a long way. If I instead don't mess with those dates and I just create new tickets on the fly, put the information in, look at what the dates say. That doesn't help me at all. If they're all the same day, the date, it's promised the same day that we created the ticket, I'm supposed to, it just doesn't make sense. So most people, they will ignore these dates because they don't find it valuable to plug in. Whereas I'm telling you here, I have found more success in shops by them just filling out those two pieces of information and then using that little process of, okay, who do I need to notify today? Who do I need to notify tomorrow? Giving yourself just a bit of wiggle room so that you're not, calling customers well after the fact. As a matter of fact, just, coming back in here and saying, okay, I'm just going to use an arbitrary date in here because I see a bunch of invoices signed to that date. But look how easy it is if I come in first thing in the morning and let's say it's June 11th, and I say, okay, there's a definitive list of everyone I need to call today. And if we've been updating our invoices correctly, once I've finished here and notified everybody, you can advance the notify date for the future, or, as the ticket cashes out, it's no longer in your open list. It's no longer our concern, right? Customers pay, they're gone, happy camper. So just trying to show here how two field manipulations can go a long way, for helping customer communication. A couple other ticket items up here at the top. Cash out date cannot be populated unless you actually run the cash out routine. So just keep that in mind. For those of you who apply a service tag, you plug that in here. A service tag is required if you do lot moves for your vehicles. So if you are planning on using our lot portering system to keep track of where your unit is on the lot, moving it from location to location or from location to into a bay and then out of the service bays, you do need service tags assigned. There is no list of service tags. They create as you create them. So ABC 1, 2, 3, you just go ahead and type that in. So the service advisor field does default so that when you create a new ticket and you're an advisor, it will automatically place your name here, or you can reassign to the list of advisors here. If someone's name is not in this list and they're an advisor, you need to talk to whoever is your HR or your onboarding department. When new users are created in Infinity, there are checkboxes to identify whether they're a service advisor or a mechanic or a parts advisor, etc. And they would need to be set up that way. Customer PO number. This is a free field for you to use. It doesn't auto-populate with anything, nor does it link any two things together. But if a customer has a parts order out there, for it to be easier for service to find that parts order, you could reference the exact PO number. So a service employee could easily take that number, go over to the purchase ordering side of the system, and find that PO. If the number is wrong or it's not there at all, it's much harder for that person to find where that purchase order is, if we haven't given an indication to that. So I would advise if it is important to put any sort of special order information there, you could plug it in right there. Okay, department is going to default to the service department when you cash out a ticket, but you can always override that. For example, if the revenue and the costs need to go landing in a different department, like sales, maybe sales is getting the credit for this service ticket, you can assign that there. If you leave it to blank, it will just default to service, which is probably what you would want anyway. So not always necessary for you to populate this field, but it does allow you to reassign the revenue and the costs once it hits the GL elsewhere than it normally would land. Changing in a customer, let's say I did grab the wrong customer entity, you can always just do the search again and pick the correct one. And of course, leave the one in here that we've got. If I need to edit this entity's information, you can click on Add Modify Entity. Now, you may find that that's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I don't need to edit it. Well, there is one primary process where you would need to make sure that it's edited. And that is if a customer comes in and they have never purchased from you, they've never been a customer with you in the past. As you notice, this Griffin Greer customer that we put on this ticket, it auto-selected their unit. Why? Because they've done business with us in the past, whether we sold them this vehicle on a deal or they had arrived here a year ago and when somebody plugged this information in, that information has to be here for us to be able to assign work to it. What happens if I take a different entity? I'm just going to grab a random one here. If you take a look, this customer does have a Mitsubishi as well. So we were lucky in that this Griffin customer has another vehicle record. Let me see if I can find one that does not so you can see what that looks like. Unfortunately, I'm striking out here. Let's see if I can get maybe one more. Nope, all these customer records have vehicles. So why don't we do this? Let's create a new one. Griffington, there we go. So if I type in a name and the system does not find that entity record, you can create someone on the fly. So first name Greer, last name Griffington, that works. Well, let's go to that customer's vehicles tab. If we went to go to create a service ticket for this customer, no vehicle information will populate. You have to add it first. So if I hit save and get out of this screen, right? Well, now look at what happens on my vehicle records. I have no stock number to pick from, right? To add a vehicle in here for us to service, we have to go to that entity record, go to their vehicles tab, hit add vehicle or vehicle here, and then go ahead and punch it in. So he has a 2019, I'm going to use a pickup example. All right, he has a 2019 Ford F-150. I could plug in as much information or as little as I want, but we do need at least something so that now we can correctly bill out this work to his 2019 Ford. So that is probably the main reason that a service employee would need to hit this Add Modify Entity button would be to add that vehicle record. If you check off Customer Waiting, there's simply a field in the invoicing screen called Customer Waiting. However you want to use that is up to you. Historically, I have used it as the customer is in the building, right? If you have customers that get same-day service that you expect them to get in and out, well, this yes here could tell me, hey, show me all the customers who are in the shop right now. So waiting, hit yes. I have two, Brian Elpers and this Greer Griffington customer. So that's up to you whether you all want to use that. It's just a checkbox on and off. PDI invoice is going to basically be coded if this ticket did come from a deal, right? If I drop a deal and the service ticket gets launched from there, it's going to check this off as a PDI invoice, meaning that when we cash this ticket out, the system is going to prompt me and say, is all prep for delivery work completed? If it is, there's a checkbox in the inventory system that identifies, yes, prep is done. So we'll talk about that a bit more on the deal processes and dropping work orders from there. But for the most part, that's just kind of, it'll automatically check off if it is a prep for delivery ticket. Hitting apply internal just does one thing. It stamps the internal customer, so your dealership name will then populate here. But you would still want to make sure you code the line items to service internal. That will bill internally a stock number that you have on the lot, for the sake of increasing its value. You do have customer information here. You've got a little bit of info here, like this is service history. So let me put back our Griffington customer. If I click on the service history, you'll see there is none, right? I don't have any previous service history that was done for this customer. I could send an email to this customer if I wanted to by clicking that little mail icon. It will populate with his email address, and I could go ahead and send that directly from our CRM. And then there's a little flag here for service follow-ups. So I could set letters to go out. It looks like here we have a 3-day letter that goes out 3 days after the cashing out of the ticket, 7 days after, 15 days after. We could set these up for service follow-ups. So this is something kind of down the road once your team is kind of really familiar with the system and we want it starting to automate this info. But just good to know that you have that functionality there. So we're pretty much bumping up to our time limit here. We've gone over the header of the information and mostly the navigation. We will have some deeper dives into this service ticket in the future service sessions where we will review going line by line, billing out time, scheduling, parts requests. There's a lot that can go on here. So service is generally going to kind of bleed into multiple training sessions. As a matter of fact, our next webinar in the series is going to be at 11:30 today, and that's going to cover service scheduling, setting up CAN jobs, and what a warranty clerk will be doing within the system. So we won't directly pick up on where we left off right here, but we will discuss back kind of what I was talking about on our calendars. We'll be talking about CAN jobs, adding lines that are automatically in the system, and then what the warranty clerks will be doing. So we'll be getting into a little bit of the bulk of the ticket. But of course, we could talk for hours on service. So, we're going to basically just getting it at a chunk at a time. So for the moment, if you have any questions, I'll leave the next couple minutes here for us to hopefully answer anything that wasn't super clear. Otherwise, thank you all for your time. And for those of you joining us again in about 30 minutes, we'll see you on then for service scheduling, CAN jobs, and warranty clerk. All right, everyone. It doesn't look like any questions have came through. So for if anyone else on the call, thank you for attending. We'll see you in about 30 minutes.